Education is apparently the biggest factor on whether or not you see climate change as a risk. That is, unless you're American. Oh boy. Now, according to new research published in the journal Nature Climate Change, people with higher levels of education are more likely to understand climate change than their less educated peers. Now, I think that goes without saying. People who are more knowledgeable on the subject oftentimes make better decisions on said subject. They understand the risks, they understand the science behind it. Except, and here's where the caveat comes in, except in a few well-developed countries where political ideology and party have a direct effect on their views regarding climate change. Now, this is interesting. Now, let's go to the methodology on this. Now, Gallup did some data. They collected data from 119 countries, and Journal of Climate Change, they took a look at this, at that data, and they used it, and they found that education level was a key determinant of climate change risk perceptions in 62% of countries around the world. However, as I said, political party and ideology predicted views of climate change in the U.S., not education alone. So, if you're an educated Republican, and yes, they do exist, you are more likely to say that climate change is either not real, or isn't a significant problem, or isn't caused by human beings. Even though you actually know the evidence, you know the facts, you still won't believe it because it's a party mentality. Interesting. Now, according to the study, it says, for Americans, just having higher education does not mean that you understand or accept the science. And this was study co-author Anthony Leiserowitz, director of the Yale Project on Climate Change Communication. Americans who have attained higher education are better at cherry-picking as evidence that seems to validate what we already believe. Now, I've spoken about cherry-picking evidence before, and they'll take a small section of the graph, for example. We have all these graphs on climate change, and they take a lull in the graph where there isn't as much significant warming, and they'll blow it up. And they'll say, look at that. See, look at this 10-year period, no climate change, no warming. What are you guys talking about? Look at this 34-year cross-section of where we had no significant warming. Climate change is a hoax. But when you take the actual graph and you zoom it out to include a larger set of numbers and a longer period of time, you see that there is actually very significant warming. It's increasing at an incredible pace. But see, that's what we talk about when we talk about climate deniers cherry-picking the data. And even those people who are educated, well, they're more able to find this data and pick it out better than someone who is less educated. So they're actually more dangerous when it comes to climate change. I mean, nothing is more dangerous than an educated fool. I believe that's part of what that old saying said. Now, as I said, that kind of makes a lot of sense from my American context because of political polarization. People in America are so incredibly polarized, and we're in this sort of red team, blue team mentality that we're so polarized that facts won't get through. They just don't. It's either very easy to ignore the facts or to dismiss them or to cherry pick. And so you end up with normally smart, very well-educated people who agree with a guy that brings a snowball into the Congress, into the Senate floor and tosses it. And then says, what, climate change? No, it snowed outside. Look at the snowball. Look, man, facts don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. There shouldn't even be an argument on whether or not climate change exists. And 97% of climate scientists agree that it is happening, that it is a danger. We're already past the idea that we need to look into more and to gather more science, gather more data. Oh, and we're not sure on this. We got to look into it more. No. We're at the point of where we have enough data to make a pretty positive conclusion. 97% of climate scientists, they agree. Now, if Republicans were to accept the science but disagree on what we should do, that I think is a very valid conversation. And that's where Republicans, with their knowledge or with their ideas of free marketeering and whatever, they could actually add something to the conversation. We can do this in a way which helps prop up big business or prop up business. And we can invest in these private corporations, for example, in the form of energy subsidies to produce more, clean energy, right? That reduces carbon emissions. Or you're going to cap and trade sort of thing. But no, they hate cap and trade. They hate green energy subsidies. It's all about coal and oil, unfortunately. And that's because they can't even agree that this is happening. Most of the people in the party can't even agree that climate change is happening. That's a problem. And this is despite the Pentagon, business leaders of some of the larger corporations. Just recently, 3 very, very large corporations came out and said, yeah, you know what? Nobody else is going to act, so we're going to do stuff to reduce our carbon footprint because we see the problem with climate change. And of course, the aforementioned scientists also. They agree that it's happening, and we need solutions. But these other people had their heads stuck in the sand, literally. And it's just amazing how all the facts and all the knowledge that we have doesn't do a damn thing. It won't get through their heads. And the fear is that some of the U.S. is going to be underwater by the time these people actually do wake up and get their heads out of the sand. It's almost like it's got to happen before they start to realize, oh shit, maybe we should do something about it. But then it's going to be way too late. I mean, it already is pretty late. We're already on track for catastrophic warming. It's already taken an effect. A good example is the droughts in California. They're worse than they would be. Now, we'd still have droughts. We still have hurricanes. We still have natural weather patterns. But climate change just makes them worse. That's why we have a problem. And that's why we have to do something now. You think it's bad now. You thought Hurricane Sandy was bad. You think the droughts in California are bad. Just wait until we warm another 2 degrees Celsius. That's going to make things very, very difficult. Very difficult. Look, man, the whole thing is that the right wing and Fox News, climate deniers, are bankrolled by extremely wealthy billionaires, oil tycoons, and that they have screwed us so much in the long run in order just to make an extra dollar, in order to not give up their part of their enormous wealth. It's hard not to get discouraged when you're against odds like that. But I think the only thing that we can do while we're boiling in the pot, so to speak, is to speak out and hope that people will listen and actually stop caring about what Fox News thinks and actually kind of follow the rest of the world in fighting against man-made climate change. And the network of Rupert Murdoch, I mean, I mentioned some of those other countries that are developed. Well, you've got Australia and Great Britain among them, and the U.S. That's where Rupert Murdoch has a lot of influence in the media. It's not a surprise to see that it goes hand in hand with climate denial. So, we got to do something. We got to keep speaking out against the propaganda and actually do something to help better our world.